Hi everyone, it's Dr. Z and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today we have a guest with us who is not only extremely knowledgeable in the field of narcissistic abuse and is an expert in the field of narcissistic abuse, but she herself is a survivor of narcissistic abuse and therefore can offer us a very unique perspective on how to navigate these complex dynamics, particularly as you go through your healing journey. So I am extremely honored today to have Dr. Kerry McAvoy with us, or Dr. Kerry. Dr. Kerry is a mental health clinician, is a narcissistic abuse survivor, and an expert on cultivating healthy relationships, deconstructing narcissism, and understanding various other mental health related issues. She's an absolute pleasure to talk to. And today we're really going to be focusing in on why it's not so easy to just leave, because it's something I hear all the time. So I really think that you're going to get a lot out of this. This may be one you want to take notes on. All right. Take care, everybody. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today, we have an expert with us on narcissistic personality disorder, narcissistic abuse, trauma. We have Dr. Kerry with us, who I just think is brilliant and adore. And I just want to get right into it with you because we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic today. So for many of you who've listened to me for a while or follow me on Instagram or have seen me as a psychologist, you know that majority of the time we talk about leaving the relationship where you're experiencing narcissistic abuse, whether that's in an intimate relationship, whether that's with a family member, whether it's with a friend or even a colleague at a job. And we really stress, not that we will tell you to leave, but we kind of stress, look, these are your options. This sounds, we kind of work towards that. It sounds a little healthier. But what we're going to talk about today is leaving the only option. And if you choose not to leave, because it's never that easy, but if you choose not to leave, what are some options that you have other than leaving? So I guess what I want to ask you first is, in your experience as an expert in this area, do you find majority of the time you're working with people on leaving, regardless of the relationship type?
Generally, yeah, because leaving is really the best way to re-regulate the traumatized nervous system, and also for the person to have enough space for them to emotionally detach and start to heal. So these relationships really are very enmeshing, and it's extremely difficult to have a sense of yourself outside of the relationship. They don't really create much space for that. So usually, is when I'm working with people or meeting people, I find that leaving tends to be the only alternative, because people with more of an immature personality structure tend to see any type of failure to agree or comply as defiance and rebellion and rejection. So it makes it really hard for you to be in a different space or with different priorities than the toxic individual.
That's right. And they'll also view that as them losing control and power over you, obviously. And so as a narcissist in particular, and also in toxic relationships, if somebody feels that they are no longer able to access your emotions, kind of infiltrate your thinking, they're not as in control of you, your behaviors, your emotions. And when that happens, they tend to engage in alternative behaviors that maybe will get you to respond. So they do what they can and they start to get creative with their responses. And I think one of the problems is that sometimes these responses, or sometimes these behaviors they'll engage in, when they realize they're losing, or they realize you figured out who they were, which I think is a little bit different than not getting a reaction. That's a whole different
I
thing
agree.
we'll
I think
talk to.
I see
Yeah.
them differently too.
Yeah. But when they don't have access to you anymore, they can't get their hooks in you, they're just kind of sliding off. It's not always that they're going to engage in toxic, they're still toxic, but toxic, directly, observably, blatantly toxic behaviors. Sometimes that response they're trying to get from you could be happiness, could be love, could be kindness. They could feign sickness and you're taking care of them. So there's a lot of different responses that can happen to get a reaction from you. And I think sometimes people are stuck on the reactions they pull from you are always going to be negative, and that is absolutely not the case. And you'll see this in
Yeah.
these situations.
Yeah, I even think we're extremely vulnerable to hopefulness.
Yes.
I think that's a
Yes.
big tool that a lot of
Promises to change.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. They're going to change and they get it now and they've come back, they've seen the light or some version of that, when really that is just more responsibility avoidant behavior. I think that's the part that I think most of us miss, is that a lot of what normal, healthy, functioning people do is responsibility taking. We assume when we see it that that's what that is. This is somebody who's stepping up and becoming accountable. Well, we don't recognize that actually with a person who's very toxically, has a character disturbance, that this is manipulation.
Right.
That there's
Right.
not responsibility acceptance, it's a responsibility avoidance,
Mm-hmm.
deliberately
I love that.
yeah,
Responsibility avoidance. I
yeah,
love it.
masking as
Yes.
change or masking as insight, when really it's nothing at all. It's just to get you off, to crudely put it, get you off your
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. I was actually talking about, not taking accountability or responsibility avoidance. I just love that term. Um, I was watching a docuseries, and I'm blanking on it. Evil Lives Here. So it's these different series, and honestly, majority of the time, the male or the female has some sort of narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder. And in one of the episodes, the wife kept finding all this evidence of infidelity, of sexual assault of other people, of him drugging her. I mean, and videotapes and all of these things that, to me, watching it, I'm sitting here going, like, what, but the way he promised her to change, that he would change, was like Oscar worthy. And it was every time. And, people are always like, how could you go back? How could? And there's a lot of shame and guilt with that. But the truth of the matter is, they are experts at this and they know exactly how to manipulate you. They're not just going to say, no, that's not true. They're going to say, no, that's not true. I'm not like your parents, right? Or no, that's not true. You're so paranoid. Remember, you told me that your ex cheated on you. And so you just assume I'm cheating. They're going to go where you're most vulnerable, which again sucks you back in. And when you're telling your therapist and when you're telling your friends and family that you're out, that's it, that was it, you're done, and then you go back, there's a lot of shame with that. And sometimes people love abusive people, and it's that it's hard to explain to people.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I want to add another
Yeah.
technique they also use. This is the one that was used against me because I'm a psychologist, so I would want to see evidence that a psychologist would want to see. I want to see this person's putting in the time and the effort, going to therapy, doing the work, reading books, having discussions with me. He did all of that, Dr. Z. In the whole 2 years, he went to therapy consistently, did seemingly all the work. And you would think, right? The average person would think, see, this is proof this person's do, showing
Well,
responsibility.
because it
They're,
it, it it
yeah.
is, but it isn't.
Right. But when you pulled the lens back and you
Yeah.
asked yourself the bigger questions, and
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that people who decide to stay or decide to leave need to ask themselves: what's consistently present? Does the behavior line up with what you would expect to see someone who's actually making change? I mean, there's a difference between crocodile tears versus somebody who's in angst, not sleeping because they're wrestling with themselves.
Yeah.
They look
Yes.
really a lot different.
Yes.
Or a person who slips because they had a relapse versus somebody who just got caught and then makes another excuse justifying and then promising again the change, but it's a repetitive process. But
Yes.
I agree with you that we get hard on victims, thinking that victims should be able to see this clearly, easily. The problem is this is a,
I mean, there's neurological changes
I
that go
know.
on. There's chemical changes. It's not
Yeah.
as easy as, well, you're smart, you should know. I mean,
Right.
no.
Well, these are sophisticated experts who have had thousands of people to practice on. By the time usually they get into middle age, or certainly the person I met, I know that in the time span I knew him, I bet you his number of relationships he'd had were still, definitely in the tens. I'm talking like 20, 30, 40, 50 in the 2-year span that I knew him. Think of the number. This is a 50-some-year-old man. The
That
number
sounds
of,
exhausting.
well, he did look exhausted. He was
It just
exhausted.
sounds
But
exhausting.
he actually had cliff notes trying to keep track of all the people because there's too many people. But
Yes.
it is exhausting to them. But again, think of the practice, though. We think
Yeah.
10,000 hours makes somebody an expert. These people have
Yes.
more than 10,000 hours in on this. They understand this intimately, exactly how you are hardwired. I just saw an example of it this week. Somebody I saw a few years ago dated, not a great relationship. I'm not interested in any kind of relationship. And he circles back, wants to know how I'm doing. We set a date just to catch up, just to see how he's doing. I'm curious how he's doing. He says he wants to know how I'm doing. I don't believe that actually is going to happen. I bet you that he's going to cancel that. But he says, I'm really disappointed that we don't have a time and date earlier. Now, he just told me his weekend's off and I'm busy all week.
Right.
So think about that. That's what we
right.
miss. Okay, what
Yes.
it connected with me. See, this is what we miss. It connected with me my need to be seen and feel special.
Yes.
That was a if you did this with me, I would know you meant it.
Correct.
Like, I really miss you. I can't wait to see you. I sure wish it could be sooner. That makes me feel really good. I like that. And then maybe I might move a few things around to see if we could do it sooner, or maybe you would too. Now, this is a person who's making no efforts to move anything around. He throws that out. So then what I did to test him was, is there a reason for the urgency? He said, no. No, it was a deliberate effort to manipulate me to move forward while he made no movement forward. And this is what we missed in these relationships, is that's very manipulative. That's very devious.
Absolutely.
But that's happening to us all the time, and we can't tell the difference because it happens in normal, healthy relationships too.
Correct. And I'll hear people, especially on social media, they'll say that happens in every relationship. And on the surface, and I talk about this a lot, and this is exactly what you're talking about. On the surface, absolutely, behaviors can look identical in relationships that are non-narcissistic versus those that are narcissistic. The difference is the underlying function, right? Or the mechanism of action, if we're really getting to it. But the reason for the behavior. Are they canceling on you, let's say, or not setting a date with you because they want you to feel that need to be needed, right? Or are they genuinely just, I have no idea what my schedule is, I have to get back to you? So on the surface, those behaviors can look identical. And so, we don't know. But when you take that pause and you look at the underlying function, what are they getting from this, and why at this moment did they decide to do this particular behavior? And you'll also start to come up with patterns. And once you have patterns, you can feel more in control and more objective.
Yeah. And that's really hard because it asks, you can see the steps I had to make.
Oh, yeah.
I had to recognize how it made me feel. I had to recognize there was a failure of seeing a reciprocal behavior back from him. I had to then ask an innocent question, it labeled in a way that would not be evocative, but just be kind of like blunt, and then see what the engagement was. But that took most of the time. We don't think that through, or they know us so well, they know where our vulnerabilities are, and they really tap into our triggers, our needs, our unmet needs, our insecurities, and then we're reacting unconsciously super fast without recognizing this has been a setup for that. So what does it look like to start to say, is this why reasons people stay? One of the things I wonder is why people stay.
Yes.
I see a variety of reasons. Some are for great reasons, some are not great reasons. A lot of them are like, I wish it was different, but it is what it is. But reasons people stay sometimes is because of their own health issues, their limited financial stability, maybe limited education or limited ability to access the kind of financial resources that would take to be independent, maybe a stage of life. Sometimes there's cultural or religious or even societal reasons that make it really, really hard. But all of these can be factors. And I think this is something I heard from Dr. Ramani, and it resonated powerfully with me, and it hit me. It was like a punch. I felt like a punch. She said, to say that somebody should leave is actually a privilege. And not everybody has the privilege of leaving.
100%. Absolutely 100% agree with that. And not only that, there's the reasons why the people can't leave, very practical reasons, right? And she's 1,000% right. It is a privilege to be able to even have that concept come up when you're in this type of abusive relationship, or even not, when people don't have kids and they're not in a toxic relationship and it just doesn't work out, get up and go. Right? I mean, leave. Right? It sounds so easy, but when you have kids, or even if you don't have kids and you're not even married, you're just in this toxic dynamic. It's hard to get out. And she's absolutely right. I also wonder too, and I always think about this: if people knew that, and somehow, and I don't, this is something that they would figure out afterwards in therapy, but if people knew that a large part of their, take away everything that you said, the religion, which I want to get back to, and finances and education, stage of life, health, all of those things, do you think that if people knew that a big chunk of the reason why they're not leaving, or why it's not an option for them, is because right now, at least temporarily, cognitively and neurologically, their brain is not wired almost to be able to actually exit the relationship?
Yeah, I would agree with that. We know that cognitive dissonance is occurring, which I'm assuming people know what that is, which is it's the confusion between what's real and what seems to be real. And that actually the brain's inability to compute causes neurological damage, which affects the executive functioning, which what we're saying is it makes decision making harder, their forgetfulness, they're distractible, they may feel a little more ADHD, they're struggling with the basic things like just eating and sleeping, regulating the food intake and getting real rest. And then on top of it, the toxic person's interfering with that because of coercive control. But you've got all of this swirling that makes it really hard for you to think outside the box.
Yeah, I mean,
And
how
these
are you going
people,
to plan to leave?
I know.
I say this all the time. This is the only type of breakup, truly,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you'll agree with me because we've talked about this before, is the only type of breakup that requires an actual deliberate exit strategy and
Yeah.
blueprint and plan.
Yeah.
Like, it needs an actual plan. So if you're consumed with all the things that you were saying, plus all the other things you were saying before about finances and health and all that, how are you formulating a plan and practicing it and putting into place and filling other people in? You're not.
Yeah. Yeah. And on top of it, 99% are experiencing some form of financial abuse.
Absolutely.
So you've got that
Absolutely.
too. They're restricting your level of privacy. There's so much of supervision. You may be limited you may not even know where the funds are, or what even I know how many people have told me they have no idea what's even coming in as a monthly budget.
They
They have
don't.
no perspective of
Nope.
that. They don't know
Nope.
what's in the bank accounts. They don't know where the bank accounts are. I mean, all these things they've been told. There's no need. You don't need to know this. It's
Mm-hmm.
beyond you. Or that's between me and my company. Oh, they'll lie. They'll lie outright and say my company doesn't give that information. It's not on the
Mm-hmm.
payroll statements.
Mm-hmm.
Like all this sort of deceptive stuff.
Yep.
That puts the person. It's really back to a privilege. I don't think we
Yes.
understand the degree when we tell
I
people
love
just
that.
leave, that it is really a privilege.
I love that. It's so true. It's so unbelievably true. So for people that don't have that option, or for people that don't want to leave, what do you tell them are alternative options? Let's start with intimate relationships and we can move into
Mm-hmm.
family and work. But for intimate relationships, married or not, what do you tell people who are very clear that leaving is not an option for whatever their reason?
Yeah. I think the first thing is to recognize that you've lost yourself and that it has become submerged and enmeshed with this other person because the other person wants that. That's the way I think of personality disorders as people who have a very shoddy foundation. So here's a house built on a foundation that's not level, it's not even, it's not on a firm ground, and it's shaky. So the way that it then supports itself is it uses people as supports. You're literally the lean-tos holding this house up, the sides of this house up and keeping it from rocking. They don't want you to be independent because then that means they can't utilize you for those supports. So
So
the first
well
thing
said.
first thing I think is begin to start to see yourself as a separate individual. That means, and it's a hard thing.
Very.
This is not easy. This is
I mean,
this is
it's
the
hard
biggest
to
work.
do anyway.
I know. This
You
is,
know?
this is one of the biggest pieces of work is to
Yeah.
start to say you decenter this person. Means they no longer their opinion, their approval, their thoughts, their love of you no longer becomes the center of your life, and they've wanted that. Used intermittent they've used intermittent reinforcement to make themselves that. So you have to like really do the
Will
hard
you
work
tell
to
people
say,
what that is, intermittent
yeah,
reinforcement, just so
intermittent
they're aware?
reinforcement. So what it is they've done studies on different types. Like if we change the rate that we reward you by time every 15 minutes or by the number every 5, whatever, they found that that's addicting, but not very addicting.
Right.
But the most addicting is when it's a variable rate at a variable time. So it's like the slot machines at Las Vegas. You never know, is it going to be the next quarter or dollar or whatever you put in these
Hmm.
days, or is it going to be the next millionth? You
Right.
don't know.
And you
But
come up with these illogical strategies thinking you have
yeah,
control over it. Like if I sit
right,
at this one for a little bit longer,
right,
this one feels lucky.
right. And
Yeah.
really, it's a random thing,
Yeah.
and these people are extremely good at randomizing our rewards. So again, they don't show up consistently. I'll never forget it. I had this wonderful, touching phone call one evening, and yet the next day or two, I may have no contact at all. It's just, this is
Yes.
hot, cold.
Yes.
And or you may have like, I've heard people say, well, we had this amazing kind of intimate experience last night. And the next day they don't even say, thanks for coffee.
Yep.
You just like, you suddenly you're visible and you're the center of the world and it feels fantastic. And then suddenly you disappeared and you're invisible. And that drives us nuts. What happens is that it successfully attaches us more deeply to that
Yeah.
person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
that's the first piece, is to start to break that attachment. We call it a trauma bond. And I think that it is legitimately is a trauma bond. And
yes.
there is brainwashing that has
Yes.
occurred where they have gotten into your head. You're now using their language to describe your world experience, your feelings. All of that's a way in which they've indoctrinated you with their world frame. You're following their rules. I mean, like, you have contact with who they like, and you're
That's right.
using the describing things the way that they describe. So it takes you starting to say, pulling yourself out. Who
Yeah.
am I in the middle of this relationship?
And I think sometimes too, I mean, the thought of that is so unbelievably scary, to have no idea who you are, no sense of self. Leaving feels like you're jumping off a bridge without, or you're driving across a bridge without the guardrails on. And, I will never forget this. I had somebody say to me one time, they had been with this person for 20 plus years, 3 kids, they were in it, right? And it, one of the things they said to me, I mean, you'll hear this to everyone, I'm a shell of my former self. I hear that all the time from people who get out of relationships like this. But one of the most upsetting things, and I still to this day remember this, somebody said to me a long time ago, I don't even know what side of the bed I should sleep on. And and in that moment, I just kind of, this is a friend of mine, and I just kind of looked at her and it was like, wow, wow. Like, wow. She didn't know what music she liked. She didn't know what her favorite color was, because she had to wear what he wanted. She had to eat what he wanted. She didn't even know that she could, that there was anything else to like. It never even occurred to her. And so at the bare minimum, she couldn't even decide what side of the bed to sleep on. And so if that's what you're up against, leaving someone who defines your world for you, even if it's unhealthy, it is brutally scary.
It is. It is. And I think that's a great starting point, though. And that's what I also often tell people. Start with, what do I like to eat? I think of, for
Yes.
example,
Yes.
the Runaway Bride. Remember how
Yes.
he asked her what kind of eggs she liked? For those who, it's an older movie. She liked whatever her partner liked. And then
Yes.
somebody challenged her, well, what do you like? So she actually made all the types and said at the end, I don't like eggs at all.
Correct. That's
Yeah,
exactly right. It's like, like, I don't even know I don't know what I like. I don't know what I want to do.
right.
I don't know who I want to be. Um, and so in I but here so here's the tricky question then. So for intimate relationships, there was a pre them, right? There was a
Yes.
point where they had a sense of identity, they knew who they were, and it got lost. And when
Or
you yeah,
or they came out of families where it never got fully
well,
developed.
so that's what I
Yeah.
was leading into, is it, so you have these people who had a pre them, they have
Yeah.
some concept of it, maybe it comes back, it'll never fully come back because the trauma has changed you have to accept that piece of it and take it and move forward with it. But exactly like you said, what I was
Yeah.
leading into is, what happens though if you're raised in a family where your sense of self and self identity are viewed as a threat, viewed as abandonment, viewed as rejection? Any steps towards autonomy is just crushed. How do you even know, one, that you don't have a sense of self, and two, how do you even begin to rebuild that when there's no pre?
Yeah, I know. That's really hard. I think that's something I discovered happened to me because I came
Mm,
out of a very coercively controlled home. And I would say it's a very kind of cult-like mentality. This is
Okay.
the way we do things. It was very religiously conservative, and it was all that overtone of, we do these because this is the way we express our religious faith. And so then I didn't really recognize that I had grown up I didn't get to ask those questions. It wasn't really allowed. The question was showing up to the system, not really showing up for yourself. That would have seen as almost like challenging, to do that.
Yep.
So then I get into a marriage that is a good, decent marriage. And there's some pieces of it maybe that didn't really allow me to be a whole lot of an individual, but I was more of an individual, enough to where I felt like I found home and really experienced that. So losing him felt like I was being lost myself because I had emerged it. So that made me vulnerable to this toxic person, who then came in with this big, huge offering of, I'll rescue you, I'll fix it for you. And then you can kind of slide into a new relationship, and I'll define things and take care of it for you, which sounded really wonderful to a person who's never gotten to really develop much of a self.
I mean, it would sound wonderful to anyone. That's the problem. It sounds great to who doesn't want that.
Yeah. So part of the challenge, I think, is learning to recognize that you don't have much of a self. And I think it starts with good questions. And what's hard about questions is we tend to ask them with a lot of judgment, self-judgment. So we need to get curious and just set shame outside the door and say, what do I like about myself? What do I not like why do I wear what I do wear? Why do I eat when I eat and the way that I eat? What do I really like to eat? And do I have any hobbies? Why or why not? Or who's my friends and what do we do? Is it friends outside of this relationship, or is there only couple friends or family friends? To start to really challenge, like, how much of a self do I think asking these starts to help you define, oh, I do have a lot of a self, or I really don't. Or that I've given a lot of it up, maybe, or that I never really knew. So to me, it starts as a chance for you to sort of see where you are, and then see this way to start to develop it. It's hard work, though, and I think that's the part that I don't want to minimize that. I don't want to minimize this is going to be a lifelong journey. I don't think we ever arrive. I think we're always in process of developing a self anyway.
Yes.
But I do think that this is a way for you to start to see what degree that you've been enmeshed, which is really what this is. It's an emotional form of enmeshment, which means you're not fully an individual. You have allowed yourself to be submerged with another person for lots and lots of reasons. And even the reasons actually don't matter. People get caught up with, I need an answer. It really actually doesn't matter.
Right.
What matters is that you have autonomy, which is really a fancy way of saying I have the freedom to do what I want when I want to do it.
That's right.
And then I'm able to be individuated, which means that I get to show up the way that I want to show up as the person who I really believe that I am. That's my authentic self.
That's right.
Toxic relationships, toxic systems will not allow either one of those.
That's right. It's like a cake. This is how I describe it to people. It's like a cake where, you have the egg in the beginning. You have the egg, the butter, the sugar, the flour. You put it, and you have them individually. But once you combine them together and you make the cake, you can't pull the egg out anymore, right? Like, you can't pull the flour out. It's done. It's already combined. And so that analogy, I think, really helps people to see exactly what you're talking about. That's how difficult it is. It doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Like, you have to find a different egg,
and you're kind of saying, and this is I guess this is a great way to say it. I would say, I think we have multiple selves.
Yes.
For one, we shed cells. We are regularly turning over our bodies all the time. I think we turn ourselves over too.
100%.
And I think that we need to view that the self that we became in that relationship has to unfortunately die.
Yes.
And we need to allow a new self, sort of like the phoenix, rise up out of the ashes.
Carrie, I love that. I love that so much. That's so good. It's so true, because you think of, we have physical developments and milestones. Why wouldn't we have internal self-structure developments with all our life experiences?
Right. And as a psychologist, we've all learned Erik Erikson's 8 stages. I really think, nobody's saying this, but I think somebody should be saying this, that coming out of one of these relationships is a transitional developmental stage.
Could not agree more. It's not a normal breakup. This is not a normal breakup.
No, it's as powerful, to me, experientially, it has been as powerful as becoming a parent. It is a complete identity reformation for me. I am not the same person I was when I was in that relationship. I'm not the same person I was in that first marriage. I am someone new. I'm not even for sure my late husband, although he deeply loved me, would necessarily like the version of me I've become.
Yeah.
I'm not for sure. Nor does it really actually matter because he's not here and I don't have a
Right.
relationship with him. But
Right.
I think we have to sort of allow this sort of rebirth
I
has
love
to
that.
happen for us to heal. I think there's another really critical piece that I see people fall apart around that I would love to talk about that
Sure.
I think is pivotal. And that is emotional detachment is a terribly scary thing. And it also, the reason we really dislike it is because it is, in a way, a death of a relationship.
Yeah.
And so you becoming healthy in the midst of these contexts, whatever it is, family, friends, or with a partner, you have to say, I will be me. I will continue to honor me, regardless of whether or not this relationship likes it. And I need to be okay with it, may spell the end of this relationship, which means giving up the hope of change. You're not no longer working for the promotion of change in this relationship. You're working towards your own end. And that can feel like the me in the middle of that relationship, that would have felt like a massive betrayal. Massive
To
betrayal.
to the relationship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
had made the relationship the primary. This is what I thought. I thought I'm good as long as we're good,
Yes.
and I
Yeah.
had to learn that I'm good when I'm good,
Yeah.
and if it's a healthy relationship, we'll be good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a healthy relationship, we won't be good.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. I mean, it makes so much sense when you describe it in the way of kind of sense of self evolution almost over time, right? And this idea that you are separate from them, not just in your feelings and your moods, but your view of yourself, that yourself exists, whether this person is here or not physically, it doesn't even matter, but you are separating from them and that you exist on 2 feet and you're standing there, whether they're there or not. And, to your initial point about this being a privilege to be able to leave, you know, it, again, this is not a normal breakup. So when people are saying, well, I dated an asshole before and blah, blah, this is not that, right? It's very, I mean, you can have somebody that you just aren't compatible with, who maybe the two of you together just was catastrophic, but with somebody else it looks different because the behavioral conditions are different or whatever, or you're older or whatever the case may be, it's just different. This will always be like this no matter who they're with. This is not a you thing, this is a them thing, and that's hard too to grasp because they have convinced you for so long that you're incapable of living a life without them, which is again another reason why to some people leaving's not an option. It's like when my kids were babies, right? Like when you would show them something and then the object permanence, and you take it and you put it behind you and it's gone forever, really it's behind your back. If you translate that into relationships, people sometimes will get extremely anxious, right? If the person that they depend on for their feelings and the feedback and all of that is not either emotionally present or even physically present, they don't realize the relationship exists whether they're there or not. And so that's kind of what we're trying to get people to separate from. But for people in this, it's hard as hell.
It is because of the inability to, you've not been allowed to separate.
Yeah.
There's been active discouragement against separating.
Yes.
I found that the one thing that super helped me to heal was that I literally developed a relationship with myself. And like friendship, like because here, so this is when it happened for me. I stepped out of that relationship in 2019. My son was gravely ill with leukemia. So my then next 6 months of my life was all about him at the hospital, hoping that he survived. So literally, I went from one catastrophe to the next fearful thing. So I wasn't a whole lot. I mean, yes, I was writing and I was doing group work and doing a lot of stuff trying to heal, but I had another driving thing that was in front of me that I really couldn't focus on outside of that. So suddenly he's better. He's finishing chemo and COVID strikes. And I'm living now in a new town that I have no relation, don't even know the town, no relationship to the town. I'm in a little studio, have no relationships. I work for home, work for myself. And the only people in my life in that area was my sons. And they both said, you know what, you've been really involved, but we need you to take a step back because we need the step back because we've had to have you here. So we need to sort of just like figure out what it means to have you live here. And we don't know if we can
That's
safely
when you
do
know
that.
you did something right.
That they can ask me that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's something.
That,
That's
yeah.
something.
And it's even for me, I did it. I stepped back.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
literally like, okay, I respect you. I'm backing up. So I go into COVID alone. Alone at all levels. And so I then said, you have you. You're going to wake up to you. You're going to go to sleep to you. You have you. What do you want to eat? And what do you want to do today? And what are you going to write? And, literally, I realized that the only way to go through this
Like you were
incredible,
dating yourself.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
This like the solitary experience, because of almost like solitary confinement in a way, was I need to discover me. So that, in a way, I have to say, COVID was a blessing for that, because I don't know if I would have been forced quite the same way to have done it quite that way. But what I discovered is, here's the new place that I'm at. And I would love people, whether you're in or out, you need to reach here. And that is to say, regardless of what happens in a relationship, I still have me. And that's good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be okay. Because she's pretty damn okay.
Yeah. And no one can take that from you.
Exactly.
Nobody can take you from you.
No. Once you get that, you never will lose that. You've got that forever.
Yeah. And that's exactly what they don't want.
They don't, because they don't have it.
They don't have it, and they're trying to take yours. And that right there is like the that's like the crown jewel to them. Like that's exactly what they don't want. And so that, alternatively is exactly what you need to heal.
And it also becomes a catnip that starts to help. Actually, catnip is like, cats don't, it's not really good for cats. But anyway, it's for you to be able to I'm sorry, I should have said that differently. It's actually not catnip, but that becomes it's sort of like wolfbane. Maybe that's a better analogy. Sort of like what pushes the wolf away. Maybe it's silver.
Yeah.
It becomes your protection against other people.
Like your kryptonite.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if that's a weakness. So this is sort of like a repellent. It becomes your repellent.
Okay, all right.
You see what I'm saying? It becomes a repellent.
Jesus, we're trying to find words here.
I know. So it becomes a repellent. So even if you get pulled in a little bit of the way, you'll start to feel like, you know what, it's costing me too much.
Yes.
I don't like that.
Yes.
Or this doesn't feel good, or I'm now not spending time with myself the way that I need, or wow, I'm not breathing. I don't feel like I can breathe in this relationship. You'll start to recognize faster when somebody is asking you to become enmeshed or submerged in them. And that will help you to pull back away.
I love that. So in other words, you're saying that development of self serves as a repellent to a narcissist, because it's something they can't have access to. So let me ask you this then. So, we hear this all the time, this myth that narcissists go for people who are really weak and submissive. And that's not true, right? No. They go for people who tend to be confident, self-motivating, have opinions, and, somebody who's really kind of good on their own, because it's further for them to fall when the narcissist kind of starts to pick your layers apart. It's more supply for them. Otherwise, if they start so low, what are they going to get from that? They want to be the ones to bring you down. So how would you differentiate kind of that sense of self that somebody may have in the beginning of the relationship versus the one they're trying to get to now?
Yeah, that sense of self that you have at the beginning. First, they are attracted to you because not only for all the reasons that you listed, but also because they want to fill themselves with what's lacking. You represent the things that are missing in their lives. And also, they're extremely there's so much about image management. So you look good on their arms, or you make them look more. And because of that, they really like. But the minute you get into the relationship, you become competition. So you're no longer being idealized, you're being competed against. And they also then are trying to absorb and replace everything that's good about you with all the bad that's inside them. So this is really toxic, which is another reason why it's so hard to leave, is because you've ingested all of that and believed a lot of it when you shouldn't have. We don't know. We don't know that. That's a natural open feedback loop that's between us and every person in the world. So it's kind of recognizing that. But part of it, I think, is just recognizing that you are a separate person, and working on that really helps you. And I found that I had to grieve the person that I was, and acknowledge. I think the other thing that we really underestimate a lot in these relationships is the amount of grief work there is.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what grief even feels like. We think it's longing. We don't recognize that longing, or trying to find closure, or that all the intense feelings that we have of trying to figure out why or how could someone do this. We don't know that that's actually grief.
Correct.
But
Absolutely.
it is grief. And
It's
I knew,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, I knew it was grief because I thought, I've been here before. My husband died. I've been here before. I
Yeah.
remember feeling this and I could like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm now the death of me, the death of the life that I dreamed about, the death of this other potential, this other person. Recognizing all of these losses then helped me to put it in perspective because grief isn't sad. Grief actually is a
Yeah.
lot of emotions. And I'll tell you,
Yeah.
one of the primary ones for me was rage.
Uh-huh.
I was
Yes.
angry at
Yes.
the unfairness of it, the
Yes.
injustice of it, the
Yes.
fact that it didn't ask for it, all these feelings that you
Yes.
have around it. So recognizing that, but putting it into perspective helps you then to process so that I think that grief leads us to that death of self for rebirth.
That's
So if
right.
we can submit to the process and hold space for it for ourselves, which is where I think mindfulness comes
Yeah.
in, meditations, all these types of
Absolutely.
things where we really urge more have a holistic approach. Not talk's really important, but it's not the only thing. Group work, all of this.
I feel the same.
Yeah,
I feel the same about that. Yeah.
We create all this space for that. That
Yeah.
helps them people then have the space to process, grieve, and then let them new self emerge.
That's
and I think it happens naturally, honestly, if we can create space for it.
And create space and with the understanding that it's not about getting rid of it, it's about carrying it differently. Right? It's about pushing it rather than lugging it, right? And it's just about sitting with it differently. And over time, it's not that the grief goes away necessarily. It just starts to, you build yourself around it. So this big thing now is in this cocoon of this much larger thing. So it just feels smaller.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So for people then who aren't leaving, right? And so we'll do this for intimate, and then also I want to just make sure I ask you for family, because I know I had a ton of questions about that from people. People listening that are saying, okay, I can't leave. I'm not leaving for X, Y, and Z reasons. I will work on developing my sense of self. But what can I expect in this relationship, generally speaking? Obviously all relationships are different. What can I expect? Is this ever going to change? Or how can I live in this dynamic and not lose myself anymore, and simultaneously put boundaries up without the other person who's abusive escalating their behavior?
Yeah.
Because there's the safety part too to this.
I know, that's the tricky part. And it's going to look different for every single person. And that's the hard part, is that you and I will not be able to give a roadmap to every person and say, this is how you do it. You're going to have to navigate that yourself, because it's a fine line. You're going to have to walk between compromising yourself, which is then self-betrayal, versus protecting yourself, but putting yourself at risk in the relationship for further abuse. Yeah. And I have a feeling that it takes a lot of emotional detachment, but it also has to sensitive your gut, listening to your gut really well, paying attention to the warning signs that this is risky. And then that may mean take you back to can I safely stay here? Because to me, I think one of the things that if you're not safe, you do need to probably leave.
Agree.
This is, I'm not going to have it cost you your life. That's just too high of a cost, or cost the life of your children. But I do think that it takes internal boundaries. And we talk a lot about boundaries. I honestly, I hate the discussion of boundaries. I think I hope I'm not stepping on your toes, but I find it kind of shallow. It's too simplistic.
It's too simplistic.
And on top of it, this is what I've discovered, and I really like this analogy, is that boundaries are a red flag to a bull, and the narcissist is going to run at them. So you're not going to, all you've done is you antagonize them with the boundary. What I recommend, and this is again comes from Dr. Ramani, I love the way she phrases it, set internal boundaries.
That's right.
You don't need to state them.
Nope.
You can say, you know what, when we get into this topic and it's a never ending argument, I'm going to say, yep, okay, I hear you, and then find a way to vacate.
Yep. And it's also about maintaining, I like to, like a neutrality almost towards them, and having that objectivity, saying, oh, there's that pattern they're doing again, there's that behavior again. And exactly what you said, it's not so much a boundary. And even if somebody is listening, and they're, what do you mean though about it? The boundary that you set, you have to understand, is not with the intention of getting the other person to get it, change anything. They're going to do exactly what they've always done.
Yes.
The difference is you being able to walk away from that situation, whatever it may be, with more empowerment, with more peace, with more neutral, but being able to regulate your emotions, which is all the internal things you're talking about, internal
Yes.
boundaries.
Yes, yes. And it may be you stand there in that conversation and you don't respond. And you're like internally you see a wall come down inside
Yeah,
yourself and saying, I'm not letting this affect me.
that's right.
They're off on another tangent that's not real. And even with the nasty stuff, they're trying to bait me. I'm not going to
Yep.
let it bait me. I'm not going to get reactive here. I already know what this is. We think of it this way. We do this all the time with our children. We just never think about it. You have a 15-month-old, you're at the grocery store. It's almost dinner time. They're exhausted. They probably missed a nap. What happens at the cashier? They're melting down
Correct.
and they're grabbing at stuff and they're mad at you and maybe even they're hitting you a few times. Okay, in that moment, you've created all sorts of internal boundaries. You're not trying to manage this child's behavior
No.
because nothing's going to work. You already know that.
Correct.
So instead, you're saying, "Don't let a fuss bother me. I'm going to just pay for this. We're going to get out of here,
Yep.
and I'm not going to react, and I'm not going to lose my cool because I know what's going on here." See, that's an example of internal boundaries.
Yep. Yep.
And
Absolutely.
we do know how to do it. We do it all the time. We just have never thought about applying it with another adult because we expect adults to have more resources. But literally,
Correct.
most narcissists are like a 15-month-old at the grocery store who's tired.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I love that. And so really quickly, before we go, can you give kind of I know this is the big question, but can you
Yeah,
give a little bit of an overview for
I
how
can.
this would apply to families where you can't necessarily leave? You're always kind of connected with other family members or whatever the case may be, even if it's 20 years and then you see them at a funeral. So what's some advice for people in families who they can't leave?
Yeah, yeah. I think the big thing is to recognize what your familial role has been, the narrative that that family has cast for you. And we all have
Mhm.
one because they like roles over identity. They don't see you as a person, they see you as a
Oh, I
role.
love that. Roles
Right?
over identity.
They
Yeah, I
yeah,
love
they don't
that.
see you
That's so
as
good.
you who's,
No.
all about you or what kind of they see you as like, "Oh, she's always the one that shows up and knows everything." Or whatever,
Yes.
whatever way it is. And most of the often we don't like it. It feels way too narrow, like a caricature of ourselves. So recognize that family role and resist buying into it. Resist reacting out of it, knowing that you still are holding on to yourself no matter what in these situations, and that you always have free choice to do whatever you want. And even if other people get upset with you, and yes, by the way, they are going to smear you. Yeah, the smear
Yes, they
campaign
will.
happens in families too,
Yep.
and they may ruin external other, I mean, like extra relationships, those extraneous relationships. But hold on to you because here's the thing: people who are healthier know this about them and it's not really swaying them, and they may be going along because they're not rocking the boat either, but it doesn't mean that you see all the back end. Assume that you don't know all the back end and just do what's right for you, and let this sort of take its toll. I mean, kind of play out, I guess. It's
Yeah.
don't
Yep.
react, let it play out.
Yep.
And really think about what it is. I'm thinking of you and I are heading into the holiday season, and I don't know when this is going to be played, but as you go into whatever, whether it's a family celebration or a birthday or holiday, for you to think, what is it that I need? What do I really want to get out of it? And separate yourself from the family rules.
Yes.
It's and the remember that this person no longer gets to define you the same way they used to.
Hmm.
You're in charge of that. Not
That's right.
that as much as I know it's very hard because this is old. So we get pulled in really quickly to think, oh yeah, I feel really bad. It undoes me. I'm back in it again. No, you're not. You still have the adult self, and that part can speak to the child self who's being shaken up.
And also, too, you're in a weird way, you're an expert at playing this narrative out that's not even yours to begin with. It was
Yeah,
sold to you essentially, and you're an expert at that. It's familiar, it's comfortable, you
yeah,
know what to do.
yeah.
So, taking on a different narrative or a different role or whatever, different
Right.
sense of identity is it's confusing and it's difficult. And you're not just setting that divide up between you and the person, the narcissist in the family. You've now changed the entire dance of the family system,
Yes, yes. And
right?
most people
You
don't
throw
recognize
everyone
that.
off.
You've thrown everybody off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that in itself has changed the system. It now
Yep.
is different because of that. But often we don't register that. We may
No.
feel like it's still playing out, but doesn't mean it actually is. You may have more power than you think because and there's I want to
I
leave it.
always say that to people.
I
Like
know.
even just changing the
Hmm.
one word in a sentence, and but, or
Yes, yes.
the amount of power you gain is it's it's such a bizarre feeling when you realize that.
Yeah,
right?
because the one with the one who's most invested in the relationship has the least amount of power.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So the
Yep.
fact that you go into these situations saying, I'm going to be okay no matter what, you've already flipped the power
That's
dynamic
right.
into your favor, whether you recognize it or not. Now, what you see actually is called protest behavior.
Mhm.
They're trying to get you back to the old way. That's why
Yep.
all of it just sort of gets really intense.
Yep.
But here's a technique that's super simple that I wish people used more often. It's really has helped me a lot, and I know can help them a lot. Start using AI. Start using ChatGPT or Claude AI or something. Run your text messages and your conversations through these AIs because it is amazing. So just this is what I do. I dump a text in and say, tell me what's going on here. And it starts to unpack it.
You put their text in it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, tell me what's happening here. And then it starts to analyze the power. And then if it doesn't say, where's the shame in here? Or who has the power? Or just start to ask some questions and get it to analyze it. It's
So
fascinating.
it'll come back and it'll say, you're
Yes.
being gaslit here.
Yep,
This
it
is
will.
love bombing behavior. They're
Yep.
manipulating you.
It will.
Wow.
It
Wow.
will. And then say, okay, this
It's
is
such
what
a
I
good
want.
tool for people in the moment.
Oh,
That grounding
and you know what?
moment.
It grounds you.
Yeah.
You've got an outside
reality
external
check.
validation. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's telling you the truth because it has no skin in the game at all. At all. And so then what you can do is run your text response.
Are people doing that?
I do it. I do it.
Amazing.
It has helped me so much. Then I run my text message through next. This is what I want to say. And I'll say, that's good. But you're going to raise defensiveness here. This might be a better way to say this.
It'll actually say you'll raise defensiveness.
Yes. Yep. It'll actually say, this is a little intense here. You're going to make that person defensive. You might want to do it here. Like one I just did recently said, that was a very delicate response. I suggest, however, you change these things.
I think you just give everybody listening like the coping strategy of a lifetime.
It's been so helpful. And then I actually took it, put a few of my own words in, used it, and I got through the conflict.
That's amazing. That is such a good resource for people because, usually when you work with coaching clients or your therapy clients, sometimes they'll, part of their process is grounding in the moment and coming up pausing and selecting a different response. And so sometimes you'll have to work with them in the moment to ground them or reshape them or what. I mean, this puts all the power and the control on that person, and now they have this strategy. That's amazing.
Yeah, I love it. It slows you down. It
Yes.
gets you to have an outside opinion. It gives you time to re-regulate. It helps you craft a better response. It validates what's actually really happening, so you know you're not crazy.
Not your interpretation.
Yep, it's not your interpretation, and then you get a better crafted comment back with your original intention. So it's been, for me, it has really helped me navigate some very dysregulating situations. It is a game changer. It is a game changer.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll end on that because I think that's just, I'm thinking of how that can help so many people.
And it's free. You know what I'm saying?
And it's free. And not even narcissistic abuse, just in general, how to respond to somebody who, is resulting in heightened emotions. Because we're in those emotional states, we don't respond to get away and avoid the emotions. Right. And sometimes what we do isn't the healthiest, or what we say isn't the healthiest. So this really helps ground you.
Often people think, well, I need a really good prompt. No, you don't. You say, I need help with this. What's going on? That's all you have to say. And then put the text in. Wow. It is sophisticated enough now that it's like sitting down with a very brilliant therapist, honestly. I hate to say it.
Think we're out of a job.
Yeah, I know. It's very. Now I have argued with it and won, but so
does it let you know that you won?
I still have a PhD here. So.
You're right. Does it let you know that you won?
Yeah, it'll concede. You're right. I see that. Yeah, it'll concede.
Get out.
Mm-hmm. It does feel like a person. I can see that's a whole nother topic. We're heading into trouble because it's going to feel like we're talking to a person.
Yeah.
It does feel like we're talking to a person.
Yeah. Wow. I'm going to try that.
Yeah, let me know what you think.
That's my evening activity. Right. Well, Dr. Kerry, thank you so much. This was so great. You're just a wealth of information from, just your knowledge of narcissistic abuse and your own experiences and being vulnerable enough to sharing that. So I respect that and feel honored that you're sharing it with me and everyone listening. So Thank you so much. We will absolutely do this again.
I love that. Thank you.
And can you tell people where they can find you and your work?
Absolutely. So I'm everywhere. Kerry McAvoy, PhD. That's my website. It's also the handles everywhere. I've got my book. If you want to read my story, it's not a self-help. It's the story of what happened.
It's
Love
so
You
good.
More. Yeah, thank you.
It's
And
so
then
good.
also I have 2 workbooks. First Steps of Leaving a Narcissist. So those of you who are like, what's going on here? That's a really great first primer to sort of figure out what's the truth. And the second one I co-wrote with Lisa Sunny called Surviving to Thriving, and that's helping you heal after the abuse, to really kind of focus on that process. But yeah, I also, by the way, I don't know if you know, I offer retreats, wellness recovery retreats. We now offer 2 retreats a year. So if people want to work in person with us for 5 days or 4 days, one's in Mexico and the other one's in Orlando, Florida. It is an immersive, holistic experience of healing. And we've done 2 now, and they've been incredible experiences.
That's
we
amazing.
really love and pamper on you. So you not only get all the psychological strategies, tips, reflections, exercises, and helps, but we also just help you feel special and loved while you build community.
And all that's on your website.
Yep.
Awesome.
Amazing. Thank you for letting me be here
today.
Thank
you so much. We will speak soon, and have a great holiday.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. I hope you found it useful, but most importantly, I hope you found it validating. Want to work one-on-one with me? Visit my website at drjamiezuckerman.com to book a personalized coaching session, and be sure to check out my on-demand workshops on topics like co-parenting with a narcissist, life after leaving, anxiety management strategies, and more. Again, that's drjamiezuckerman.com. You'll also find links to my interactive workbooks, merchandise, resources, and newsletter sign-up. Next Up Narcissism is as much your podcast as it is mine. I want to hear your feedback and what you want to hear. So make sure to leave a podcast review wherever you listen, or send an email to nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Again, that's nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to tune in next week to see what's up next on Next Up Narcissism.